AI companies were to be better, like kind of built dashboards or transparencies or things that they are kind of saying, hey, we're holding ourselves accountable to being good stewards of humanity and all communities. What kind of things would you like to see them paying attention to themselves? What avenues of communication or transparency might be really good?
The way I would think about it is I think a lot about access. So I think about who's using the tools. So one thing that's just interesting is how do we think about early adapters, not as just people who have cell phones, who have this low, like how do we actually make other communities early adapters? And what would technology have to look like if we said, for example, we want young Black men to be the largest users of this technology? And so one is, I think, in most cases, when we talk to other companies about early adapters, it's often someone technologically sound or so, like it's a certain profile. And so I think about it as like Uber Black to Uber, right? It's like Uber Black is, for the folks who pay for a car. And then eventually, like all things, Reaganomics, it trickles down. And so one thing would be to think about how do these tools become strategies for folks that the early adapters are actually folks of color or folks with different economic status. And so that's one thing I think about. And then I think about the reporting. I would love to understand how the AI systems were better than the current systems. Do we create more time for working moms? For different people, elevation is different. But it's like if AI were saying, we actually are going to elevate X people or think differently, and here's how we might measure that. It may not be that there's a perfect answer across all AI. It may be that each company gets to say, how do we, to your question, how do we elevate? How do we improve? What are the things we seek to improve? In my last company, it was like, oh, we know now people pick folks who work in their homes based on color. So what we're going to do is build systems that make it difficult to do that. So if I were thinking about AI, I'd be like, what systems do people get excluded from? How would we think about it differently? If we think about the fact you're more likely to be stopped because you're Black, okay, great. Would we tell people to drive different streets? Would we advise them that here's where people are most likely, what are the ways in which the technology might perform better? And so if you thought about AI as an opportunity to be able to be exposed to all the things that we are not inherently exposed to, it could be opportunity. And I wish that, and I hope that.
And I think part of the thing that the emphasis is that it's not rocket science to do this. It's making sure you got the right questions. You make sure you've got the right kind of focal points on what the issues are, to not overly generalize from yourself, where frequently you will not see the thing that is a landmine or something else that's super important. And to make sure you talk to people, as people.
We're just so lucky that we get to have our lives be about, like, how do we make the world better? And I think that's what technology at its best should do, is to think about how do you scale the best of us? How do you scale the things that we think are worthy of being scaled? And it's the thing I learned when I worked for Prince is I'd been in the labor movement, and we used to try to convince people to come to meetings. We'd be like, free food, like whatever we could do. We call over and over, please come volunteer for some candidate. And then I learned this very basic principle with working with Prince, which is people like to come to a Prince concert. And we never had people be like, oh, I don't want to come. So I was like, oh, it seems like when you make it easy and joyful, people are more likely to come. And I was like, doesn't seem like a big life principle. But I was like, I spent my whole life trying to make things seem like someone was called to do it. It was the right thing to do, kind of a little judgy. And I finally realized, if you don't you want to save the country? This person is the worst every election. This person's going to be the worst. The country's going to fall off this person. And I realized, when you invite people to something that's enjoyable, they actually say yes. So I was like, oh, we should be inviting people to something that's enjoyable. And I think that's what technology has the opportunity to do.